This is The Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, so much to discuss right now in the Valley of the Sports with the Diamondbacks at the top of the list, and it appears that they dodged a bullet today with reports coming out that Corbin Carroll is not going to spend any time on the injured list and is going to join the team out on the road. So let's get an expert's perspective here on the Diamondbacks, what this means. The one, the only Jesse Friedman joins us from PHNX Studios. I hope you are maybe having one of those beers behind you in the is there real beer in there, or is that just for decoration?
Of course there's real beer in there, Mark. I don't know why you would question that. Of course.
Yeah, well, I know how TV works. But it looks nice. You look nice. And let's get right to it. Corbin Carroll, it looks like the MRI came back clean. So, I mean, it kind of goes without saying here, but in a year that has been just stopped so many times by injury, there's not an injury here to the Rookie of the Year. What do you think this means to the clubhouse?
Yeah, it's big. No question about it. Corbin, obviously, it's been a tough year for him. This is not at all the sophomore season that he was hoping to have, or that the Diamondbacks were hoping he would have, at least not up to this point. But he's started to really look better over the last couple of weeks. You've seen Corbin get on base pretty much every single game that he's played in. He's had some multi-hit games. He hasn't really hit the ball over the fence, but he has his gap power, at least, has kind of shown up in spurts here over these last few weeks. So he's starting to look better. And I mean, it really would have been rough for the Diamondbacks and for him if, this progress that he's made was brought to a halt by an injury that kept him out for a few weeks or whatever. So, we still don't know officially what this is going to look like, but it sounds like there's at least a chance he could be in the lineup in there tomorrow in DC.
Yeah, and our good friend Nick Pecoro, the first to report that looks like he's going to travel to DC. As you've watched Corbin Carroll this year and struggle and talk to the media and the different tones, from spring training to there was a Sunday probably a month ago where he just kind of held court for a little bit. How would you assess the tone yesterday compared to the tone other times he's talked to the media so far this year?
Yeah, I actually, unfortunately, wasn't at the ballpark yesterday. I wound up spending Father's Day with the family.
Nice.
But still have been able to, certainly been a part of a lot of the conversations that Corbin has had with the media throughout the season. And I was able to see some video from yesterday, and it seemed like his spirits were relatively high. He didn't seem too concerned about it in the moment. It appeared that he was somewhat confident he could be in there in DC, and that's what it looks like. That's how it looks like things are going to go here. But yeah, I mean, there's no question in the bigger picture with the struggles that he's had. This has been a really tough year for him. I mean, Corbin is someone who not only had pretty much instant success in the big leagues, but had instant success in high school. After he was drafted and came over here in the minors, he tore up pretty much every stop along the way. So it's hard when all you've really known is success everywhere you go, and suddenly you just you're among the bottom 5 or 10 in the league in OPS or whatever it was. But it feels lately like he's kind of started to work his way out of that.
Can you put your finger on exactly what the struggles are as you've been able to kind of collect information when you've been at the park?
I'm sure there's multiple factors. What Corbin described to us, this was maybe about a month ago, was that he had gotten his bat path had essentially gotten too flat. That's at least what seems to be a pretty significant part of the issue for him. He took a whole bunch of swings over the off season, specifically on high pitches. That was something he was trying to improve at. And it sounds like, in order to hit pitches up in the zone, you naturally have to swing a little bit flatter. And it sounds like some of that kind of bled into all of his swings and just made it a little bit harder for him to get to certain pitches. So it's difficult. I mean, Corbin is such a hard worker, such a thinker, a perfectionist, I think, in some ways. And so for him, he wants to go into an off season and identify how he can get better and do everything he possibly can to accomplish that. Seems like he might have done himself a little bit more harm than anything in the process by kind of messing with his swing in some unfortunate ways. So yeah, I think he's kind of worked his way out of it. I think better swing decisions have also been a part of the success recently, just laying off some of those pitches that he was getting beat on early in the season. But, it just goes to show, like, baseball's a really hard sport. I mean, you can be one of the best few hitters in the league one year, and, you make some tweaks that maybe have some negative effects, and, suddenly your numbers just are not nearly what they were before.
Right. It's a game of inches, like a lot of professional sports. As far as, I always seeing his shoulder injury last year and, thinking, oh man, this great story was going to come to an end. And then he bounces right back and is right there making the final out of the National League Championship Series. And we're never going to, no one's going to, rightfully so, tell you if they're injured, because the other team could exploit it as a weakness. But I think when I look at him, that shoulder's always going to be some sort of an issue, and he tries to adapt his swing accordingly. How much concern do you think there is there? How much concern do you personally have for Corbin? Just stature, he's not the biggest guy, holding up over the course of time as hard as he plays and as hard as he runs.
Yeah, I think, the shoulder was certainly a question that I had, in the second half of last season. Even the numbers weren't quite what they were in the first half. So yeah, it was a question that a lot of people had. He has always been adamant that there weren't any injury concerns there. The Diamondbacks have said that as well. As you said, teams are always going to be kind of wary what they share with the media, and rightfully so. But yeah, it seems like his shoulder's fine, and that hasn't had really anything to do with the issues that he has had. But I remember even when he first had that surgery, it happened several years back, pretty early on in his minor league career, when he had season-ending shoulder surgery just a few days into the season. And after coming back from that, he was very willing to admit that it's never going to be the same. Like, when you have a major shoulder procedure like he did, it's never quite going to feel like it did before. It's not really a situation where you get exactly back to where you were. You have to kind of just figure out how to live with it, and how to operate within this new normal that a situation like that creates. And last season, he certainly showed that he has the ability to do that. And I think now he's just, looking to get back to that.
All right, Diamondbacks take 2 of 3 from the White Sox over the weekend. I wanted to sweep. They were so bad. I was so frustrated on Saturday watching that. Was the series against the Angels and the White Sox a success in your opinion?
Success, I think I have to say yes. Any series, a series win is a series win at the big league level. So I would probably call them both successes. But yeah, the White Sox came in, I think they were 18-52 or something like that entering the series. For them, taking one game out of a 3-game series is actually a better than normal outcome. Their win percentage this season is, somewhere around 25% or something like that. So they take 1 out of 3. They're doing pretty well for themselves. So yeah, far from disastrous from the Diamondbacks perspective. I think if they had lost the Sunday game against the White Sox, we're probably having a pretty different conversation right now. But with that win, you win those 2 series. You didn't quite do what you probably would have hoped to. The D-backs did have a chance to get all the way back to 500, which I'm sure would have felt good coming into this week against the Nationals, and then a very, very good Philadelphia Phillies team this upcoming weekend. But yeah, if you're winning series, you're moving in the positive direction. It certainly could have been a lot worse.
I think Jock Peterson, I think he's been good. I think he's been as advertised this year, and has certainly shown it with his power. But man, I miss Tommy Pham. And I think Tommy Pham was a big reason why this team went to the World Series last season. Do you think they have made up for Tommy Pham's impact in the lineup last year when he was traded over and helped kind of send this thing skyrocketing in the postseason? Do you think they have made up for that in the lineup and have enough of that juice, of that Tommy Pham juice to get him back into the playoffs this year?
I guess Tommy Pham, it wasn't just what he brought to the lineup. It was what he brought to the clubhouse as well. There's been, that's well documented at this point, just the impact he had and how much respect his teammates had for him. And Torey Lovullo talked about this with us the other day, just how it was sort of no nonsense with Tommy Pham, and it really helped the Diamondbacks kind of lock things in the way they needed to down the stretch last year. But in terms of his on-field production, I think the D-backs did pretty well. Randall Grichuk, guy they signed over the offseason, they might have had more DH at-bats in mind for him than anything when he signed, but he's wound up playing quite a bit of outfield as Pham did last year, and he's been really successful, not only against lefties, as he was primarily brought in for that purpose, but he's also hit righties pretty well too. And I also think Jake McCarthy has been a big part of kind of replacing Pham's production in the lineup. McCarthy's OPS is, I believe, just over 770, which is really a pretty impressive number given what he gives you on the base paths and on defense as well. So yeah, Pham, clubhouse wise, like probably not a guy you can fully replace, but his what he brings on the field, I think the Diamondbacks have done a pretty good job there.
No, I agree. I agree with everything you just said, but I still miss Tommy Pham.
That is fair.
When it comes to Alek Thomas's impact getting back, how would you expect him? Do you expect him to just slide right back in the lineup and take over center field, or is this going to be sort of a see how it goes type situation?
I think he'll be back in there in center field. I mean, that's really Alek Thomas's calling card, right? I mean, he's one of the best defensive center fielders in the game. If he wasn't ready to go out and play center field for you every night, I think the Diamondbacks would, they would give him whatever time he needs in AAA or more rehab or whatever he needed to get there. And he's not there quite yet. Sounds like he's going to start playing for AAA Reno on Wednesday and then likely spend the full weekend there. I think a return to the D-backs next week during the homestand is probably the most realistic outcome. They might slow play it a little bit. Maybe he won't play every day. Wouldn't be a surprise to see him get some off days against lefties in particular. But yeah, Alek Thomas, if he's healthy and ready to go, center field he's very, very good at that. And I'm sure that's where the Diamondbacks would want him to be.
If you get 3/5 of your pitching staff back at some point from injury before the trading deadline, is that going to feel like they went out and made a number of huge moves to make a playoff push here?
100%. Yeah. I mean, at this point, Eduardo Rodriguez feels like might feel like sort of a dream to Diamondbacks fans. Like you've never actually seen him pitch in a regular season game this year. You might have even sort of forgotten that was a really big move that the Diamondbacks made to kind of start a really big offseason. So yeah, getting Erod back would be huge. Getting Zach Gallen back will be huge. I think that, that has a chance to happen within the next couple of weeks with Rodriguez and then also with Merrill Kelly. Those guys are looking at, probably late July, maybe even early August, sometime in August. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, and I don't think we can really overstate the impact of those injuries for the Diamondbacks this year. I mean, it is 3/5 of your starting rotation, as you mentioned, and the Diamondbacks came into this season, I think, with a decent assortment of starting pitching depth. But the reality is that it hasn't really panned out the way that they wanted it to. Jordan Montgomery has certainly had his struggles. And then some of the young guys, Slade Ciccone, Ryan Nelson, Tommy Henry, those guys have yet to really separate themselves at all. So the drop off between them and, what you were kind of expecting to get from those spots in the rotation is pretty big at this point.
Do you have a feel for the contract situation with Zach Gallen? I do. There's some concern there. This may become an issue, especially at the trading deadline. He's got a year and a half left. Do they lock him up long term? Do they shuffle the deck? How much of a distraction do you think that could potentially be?
Probably not a distraction. I think the Diamondbacks are, focused on this season right now. And I think Gallen probably is as well, especially as he's on the injured list and trying to work his way back. But yeah, it's no secret. I mean, Zach Gallen's agent is Scott Boras, and Scott Boras tends to take his clients to the open market. You do see some extensions there. Extensions have happened in the past, but they're not all that common. I do feel like the most likely outcome there is that Gallen hits the open market. And it doesn't mean the D-backs couldn't bring him back. I mean, they did that with Lourdes Gurriel this past offseason where he hit the open market and they wound up bringing him back. But the price tag on Zach Gallen, and rightfully so, is going to be really high. I mean, we just saw Aaron Nola over the offseason sign back with the Phillies for 7 years and around $170 million. Gallen has a pretty clearly better track record than Aaron Nola at this stage in his career. So, 6, 7, 8 years, $200+ million. This contract has a a legitimate chance to be in that range. And certainly seen the Diamondbacks be more aggressive in that sense recently. They did spend a lot this offseason. They have a franchise record payroll right now, but that's going to be a long-term commitment. And this regime has had their reservations about that kind of thing in the past.
Well, and next trading deadline, that's going to be the one to watch, because
yeah,
you don't want to lose them for nothing, but you would hope that that potentially something gets done there in the next year and a half. But you got to get it back there, back on the mound from the hamstring cramping. As far as this coming road trip and this coming weekend, I mean, the Nationals, you'd like to go and see them go in there and take the series and potentially get 3. But you're going up against a Phillies team that was just destroying people the first couple months of the season. Here, you have a National League Championship Series rematch. So what's a win in Philly look like this weekend? I know we take them one game at a time, but let's go ahead and jump to the next series.
It's going to be tough. I think the Phillies are getting Trey Turner back from an injury, so that's certainly a big addition for them. And I mean, the Philadelphia Phillies are a very, very good baseball team. It's not only the lineup, which has been hitting for years, and that seems to be a pretty safe bet for them at this point, but Ranger Suarez is a key piece in their rotation. We saw a little bit in the postseason last year. Suarez was more of a mid-rotation guy last season. This year, he's in the conversation to start the All-Star game for the NL. He's been that good. And that's in addition to Zach Wheeler, who's a perennial Cy Young candidate, in addition to Aaron Nola, who's been excellent this year as well. So, yeah, the Phillies, I mean, the Diamondbacks are going to have their hands full for sure, especially going into Citizens Bank. It's obviously one of the more hostile environments to play. We certainly saw that in the postseason last year, and those fans weren't too happy, Mark, about what took place in that ballpark last October. So I have a feeling it'll be even noisier over the weekend in Philly than maybe it usually is.
I don't know what was better, watching Philly fans get that upset or Dodger fans get that upset and have to go into the winter. What else are you kind of marinating on? What else are you watching here as the Diamondbacks approach the home stretch here to the All-Star break?
I think there's a few hitters that they really could use to get going. I mean, Gabriel Moreno was a really big part of this offense. Last season, we saw him hit third for the Diamondbacks throughout the majority of their postseason run. He really seemed to be taking some steps forward offensively. We haven't quite seen that this year. He's looked good in spurts, but his OPS is still in the 670 range, something like that. He hasn't quite been the same guy that we saw in the second half last year. So him turning things around would be big. Corbin Carroll, going back to what we were talking earlier, I mean, him just continuing to move things in a positive direction is really important. At this point, I don't think it's as much about his end of year numbers, whether he finishes top 5, top 10 in the MVP conversation again, or, what his OPS is at the end of the season, any of those things. I think you're just looking for Corbin Carroll the rest of the season to be a legitimate threat at the top of your lineup. Like, he's probably going to be batting leadoff for the Diamondbacks most of the rest of the season, as he has up to this point. And you want to see him get on base. You want to see him wreak havoc on the bases as he did a year ago. So, the starting rotation has to get healthy. I mean, that's certainly a big thing, but in terms of the players they have, Moreno and Carroll, two of the best young players in the game last year, the D-backs really would benefit from those guys getting back on track.
All right, and where can we find you on the airwaves, online, on YouTube, on social media, and will you be out on the road at all with the team anytime in the future?
Won't be out on the road for this road trip. Their next road trip, I believe they're in LA and San Diego. I will be out on that one. But yeah, you can find my writing over at gophnx.com. We've got some other great writers covering other Valley sports teams there as well. All of our podcasts covering the Diamondbacks, we've got 5 of those a week. You can find those on podcast platforms or on YouTube. Our channel is PHNX Sports. And then, of course, you can follow me on X for people who want to do that as well. I'm at Jesse and Friedman over there.
I think you should have a beer now. I appreciate all your time.
I will do that, Mark. A celebratory beer in honor of you.
Okay. I might have to pop over there and have one as well. So, hey, thanks so much for the time. Great stuff as always, and have a wonderful week.
All right. Thanks, Mark. You too.
This is The Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns. This is the Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns.